They had been married only 48 hours. Asad was 27, a travel photographer with a hunger for beautiful, forgotten things. He had wide shoulders, a quick laugh, and the particular kind of confidence that young men carry before the world teaches them better. Zara was 24, quiet where he was loud, steady where he was restless. She had large dark eyes that seemed to hold light even in dark rooms, and a gentleness about her that drew people without her trying. Her hair was long and black and fell past her shoulders in the way that poets in old books try and fail to describe. She was, simply put, extraordinary to look at, the kind of beautiful that doesn't announce itself but stays with you long after you've looked away. The honeymoon had been Asad's idea, of course. Imagine it, he had said, showing her photographs on his laptop 3 weeks before the wedding. A colonial-era mansion on a mountain. Nobody's stayed there in years. I've gotten permission from the caretaker. One night, just us, total isolation. It'll be the greatest adventure of our lives. Zara had looked at the photograph for a long moment. The mansion stared back at her from the screen, its windows dark, its walls draped in ivy like long fingers. It looks haunted, she had said quietly. Asad had laughed and kissed her forehead. Every old building looks haunted. That's what makes them beautiful. She had let herself be convinced. She loved him. And she trusted, as new brides often do, that love is enough armor against the world. She would learn otherwise before sunrise. They arrived at the gate just as the last light died in the sky. The iron gate creaked as Asad pushed it open, and the sound rolled across the mountainside like a warning no one heeded. He had his camera slung over one shoulder and a duffel bag in his other hand, and he walked ahead, already composing photographs in his mind. Zara followed more slowly, her dupatta pulled close, her eyes moving across the darkened garden, dead rose bushes, cracked stone fountains, a lone pomegranate tree whose fruit had split open on the ground, staining the earth a deep and unsettling red. The caretaker, an old man named Babu, met them at the front door. He was thin as wire, with white stubble on his jaw and eyes that held something that took Zara a moment to name. Then she recognized it. Fear. The old man was afraid. And he lived here. Everything is ready inside, Babu said quickly, pressing an old iron key into Asad's hand. The room's on the second floor. There is food in the kitchen, lanterns, firewood. He paused, and his eyes went to Zara for a moment, just a moment, and in that moment, something in his expression broke open like a wound. Then he looked away. I won't be staying the night, Babu said. I never stay the night. Why not? Asad asked, grinning. Babu looked at the ground. Because the house does not like me to be here when it receives guests. He said nothing more after that. He walked to the gate, and without looking back, disappeared into the darkness of the mountain road. Asad watched him go, shook his head, and laughed. Brilliant. Even the caretaker is dramatic. Zara said nothing. She was looking at the mansion's upper windows. She thought, only for a second, so quickly she almost dismissed it, that she saw the curtain in one window move. But there was no wind. Inside, the mansion was beautiful in the way ruins are beautiful, mournfully, achingly, like something that had once been loved and then abandoned. The ceilings were high and carved with floral patterns now thick with dust. The floors were marble, veined in grey and white, cold beneath their feet. Portraits lined the walls, old British officers, a Maharaja in formal dress, a woman in Victorian clothes with a face that seemed too aware for a painting, her eyes following you no matter where you stood. Asad moved through it all with delight, photographing everything. Zara lit the lanterns, set the kitchen, laid out their dinner. She tried to make it feel like a home. That is the instinct of people who sense danger. They try to make things ordinary. They ate together at the long dining table, their voices and laughter too small for the enormous room. The candles between them cast warm light and deep shadows in equal measure. For a little while, it was almost romantic. For a little while, Zara forgot the fear that had been sitting in her chest since the gate. Then, at precisely 11 o'clock, she would remember the time later, because the grandfather clock in the hallway struck it. She heard footsteps on the floor above. Slow. Deliberate. Heavy. She put down her fork. Did you hear that? Asad looked up from his camera screen. Hear what? The footsteps had stopped. Footsteps, Zara said. Upstairs. Old house, Assad said. Wood settles, pipes groan. It's fine. She looked at the ceiling. The plaster above them had a crack running through it like a scar, and hanging from the chandelier was a single cobweb that was now, for no reason she could explain, swaying gently left and right. There was no draft. All the windows were shut. She watched the cobweb swing. Back and forth, like a pendulum counting down. They went to bed around midnight. The bedroom on the second floor was large and cold despite the fire Assad had built in the fireplace. There were heavy drapes over the windows, dark and velvet, and a four-poster bed with carvings along its frame, roses and vines twisted together in patterns that, when you looked too long, seemed to shift into faces. The fire crackled. The shadows danced. Assad fell asleep quickly the way men who feel safe always do. Zara lay awake. She was not the kind of woman who frightened easily. She was rational, practical, grounded. She did not believe in ghost stories. She had told herself this repeatedly on the drive up the mountain, and she told herself again now, lying in the dark, listening to the house breathe around her. Because it did breathe. She was sure of it now. A slow, rhythmic exhalation, not wind, not the settling of wood, but something more deliberate. Something aware. She closed her eyes. She tried to sleep. And then, clearly and unmistakably, she heard someone whisper her name. Zara. Her eyes opened. The voice had come from the corner of the room. The dark corner where the firelight did not reach. She stared into it, her heart slamming in her chest so hard she could feel it in her throat, and she saw nothing. Just darkness. Just shadow. But the shadow was the wrong shape. It was too tall. And it had no edges. She shook Assad's shoulder hard. Assad. Assad, wake up. He stirred, groaned. What? There's something in the corner. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, looked at the corner. Zara, there's nothing there. Go to sleep. I heard it say my name. He looked at her, a long, gentle look, and put his arm around her. You were half asleep. You imagined it. I'm right here. Nothing can hurt you. She wanted to believe him. She leaned into him and closed her eyes. But she did not sleep. And she noticed that her husband, who had been warm as a furnace when they went to bed, was now cold. As if something had leached the heat from the room while they weren't paying attention. The fire was burning lower. She watched it. And in the dying light, she saw, clearly this time, impossible to dismiss, that in the corner of the room, the darkness had taken a shape. The shape of a man. Enormous, too tall for the ceiling, bent slightly at the top, like something forced to contain itself in a space too small for it. It stood completely still, and its stillness was worse than any movement would have been. And it was watching her. Only her. Not Assad. Her. She did not scream. She was too afraid to scream. She pulled the sheet to her chin and squeezed her eyes shut and whispered every prayer she knew, one after another, like a rope she was climbing hand over hand in the dark. When she opened her eyes again, the corner was empty. The fire was out. The dreams began the moment sleep finally took her. She was standing in a garden, the mansion's garden, but as it must have looked a century ago, lush and impossible, roses blooming in impossible colors, the fountains running with clear water, pomegranate trees heavy with fruit. The sky above was purple, the color of dusk, and everything had the too bright, too still quality of a world that exists only in the mind. He was sitting on a stone bench in the center of the garden. She knew, without knowing how she knew, that this was him. The thing from the corner. The presence that filled the house. He was different here, not a shapeless darkness but something formed, something that had chosen the shape of a man, tall and grave and arresting, dressed in white, with eyes the color of smoke and a face that was beautiful in a way that made her afraid. Not ugly afraid. Something deeper and older, the fear of standing at the edge of something immense and feeling the pull. He looked at her across the garden, and his expression was, she would think about this later and never quite find the words, tender, devouring. The way someone looks at something they have wanted for a very long time. You are more beautiful than the moon and its reflection combined, he said. His voice was the sound of wind through a corridor you've never walked down. Zara stood very still. Who are you? I am the one who has lived in this mountain since before your people gave mountains names. He paused. I have waited here a long time. I have watched many seasons pass. And in all that time, I have never seen anyone like you. I am married, Zara said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Something shifted in his expression. I know. There was no anger in it. Only something heavier. The man who sleeps beside you does not deserve what he has. You don't know him. I know what I see. He slept while you trembled. He rose from the bench, and his height was wrong, too much. She had to look up and up to find his face. I would never let you tremble. I want to go back, Zara said. You are free to go, he said, and his voice was strange, full of a restraint that seemed to cost him something. I am not what the stories say I am. I do not take what is not given. He looked at her, and the sadness in his smoke-colored eyes was real. But I will not pretend I do not want you to stay. The garden began to dissolve around her, the roses fading, the sky darkening, and his voice came from everywhere at once as she fell back toward waking. Her name will be written in this mountain until the mountain crumbles. That is my nature. I cannot unmake it. She woke before dawn, gasping. Assad was not beside her. The bed was cold and empty. The fireplace was dead ash. The room was dark in a way that felt pressurized, like the air itself was holding its breath. Assad. Her voice was a whisper. Then louder. Assad. No answer. She pulled on her shawl and stepped into the hallway, lantern in hand. The house was deeply, completely silent. Her feet on the marble floor made a sound that seemed too loud, that seemed to carry too far. She went from room to room on the second floor, calling his name, the lantern throwing her shadow long and crooked on the walls. She found him on the third floor. He was standing at the end of a long corridor, facing a window, perfectly still. The window looked out over the mountain, the dark pines below, the grey sky beginning to pale at its edges, the valley far below like something from another world. He stood with his forehead pressed to the glass and his arms at his sides, and he did not turn when she came in. Assad. She touched his shoulder. He turned, and for a terrible half-second, his eyes were blank, not sleeping, not awake, something between, something she had no name for, and then they cleared, and he blinked, and he was Assad again, her husband, confused and cold and scared. What am I doing up here? He said, voice rough with something. You were sleepwalking. She took his hand. It was ice. Come back to the room. He looked at the window. I dreamed someone was calling me, asking me to come to the window and look down. He swallowed. If I had looked down, I would have jumped. I know I would have. The silence between them was full of things neither of them said. We are leaving now, Zara said. Get your things. They packed in 12 minutes. Assad did not argue. He had the hollow, shaken look of a man who has glimpsed something he cannot explain and whose bravery has quietly excused itself. As they loaded the car, Zara heard the front door of the mansion open behind her. She turned. No one was there. Only the door, standing open, and beyond it the dark interior of the house, and from within that darkness, a feeling, vast and sorrowful, like standing beside an ocean at night. She understood, standing there in the pre-dawn cold, that whatever lived in that house had tried to make her husband jump from a window. Not to take him, but to remove him. That was the difference between what it could do and what it chose not to do with her. The distinction was not comforting. It was, if anything, more frightening. She held herself very still and said, clearly, to the open door and the darkness beyond, I am grateful that you let us leave. We are going now. And we will not return. She waited. From deep inside the house, something exhaled, long and slow and reluctant, like a candle flame accepting that it must be blown out. Then the door swung shut on its own. Slowly. With dignity. She got in the car. They drove down the mountain in silence, the sky turning grey and then gold at the rim of the world. When they reached the valley and the paved road and the first smoke rising from morning fires in the town of Sarhad, Assad reached over and took her hand. I'm sorry, he said. I should have listened. Yes, she said simply. You should have. He squeezed her hand. She did not let go, but she looked out the window, at the mountain growing smaller behind them, at the ridge where Koh-i-Noor Mansion sat in its mist, and she thought of smoke-colored eyes and a voice that said her name will be written in this mountain until the mountain crumbles. She thought, some things love in ways that cannot be allowed. And some sorrows belong to creatures older than memory, and there is nothing to be done for them. She said none of this aloud. She held her husband's hand, and the car moved forward, and the mountain fell away behind them, keeping its old silence, keeping its old secret. And in the mansion on the ridge, in the dark corridor on the 3rd floor, where the first light never reached, something stood at the window, watching the road below. For a very long time. They never spoke publicly about what happened that night. Asad deleted every photograph he had taken inside the mansion. He never explained why, but Zara noticed that his hands shook while he did it. They moved to a new city 3 months later. They had children. They built a quiet life full of ordinary, beautiful things. But sometimes, when the nights grew very long and the wind came from the north and carried with it the faint smell of pine and cold stone, Zara would wake before dawn and lie still in the dark. And she would hear, or imagine she heard, far away, on some mountain she had left behind, a sound. Like someone saying her name. Once. Just once. And then nothing.